That, of course, is the great Paul McCartney.
Welcome to Expert Minutes. I'm John Hambone McGuire.
This conversation
Sweet, juicy. Where did that word come from?
I don't know.
Bet you never thought you'd hear that on the radio.
Well, hello and welcome once again to Podcast Radio. My name's Graham Mack, and on Fridays at 5 o'clock and across the weekend I present the Pod 20, which is a countdown of the top podcasts in the world. And one of those podcasts is called Old Gits and Hits. And I'm pleased to say, welcome Old Gits, if that isn't too much of an insult.
No,
Well,
you
well-
call us anything like. We've been called worse.
Okay.
Yeah, and welcome to you, Graham, as a fellow old git.
Well, thank you very much. Of course I am. Yes, more than a fellow old git. I just before we went live, I was complaining about something that gets up my nose. Yeah, I'm a very good old git because I've been practicing my whole life. So I've been waiting for this age, and now I'm really good at it. But your show isn't about moaning. It's kind of. It's about anything and everything, isn't it? Who wants to start to try and explain what your podcast is? And then we'll talk about the history of it, because I know it's a radio show as well. But who wants to nominate themselves as the spokesman to explain what the show is?
John,
Well-
you go for it.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, when it comes to explaining something, we never nominate Chris because he'll do, you know, he'll do half an hour when he opens the fridge, the light on his face, and woo! No, the show started off as a radio show, which perhaps we'll come on to, and
We will.
A
Yeah.
couple of years ago, we decided to make a podcast of what we do on the show, and we stuck it out every month. We call it the worst of the best, or the best of the worst bits of the show. And then a year or so ago, I was talking with the lovely gentleman at Podcast Radio, Jerry, and he said, "Oh, I'll run your podcast. That'd be great." And then for some silly reason, we volunteered to do a weekly hour on podcast radio. So and it's our first birthday in a couple of weeks' time at the beginning of April. We've been on podcast radio every single week for a year. So we need to do something to celebrate our birthday.
Okay. Do
and-
you know
and the
what yet?
do we know what? Well, I don't know, guys. What do you fancy celebrating?
It's like, let's be honest, it's like most of our shows, nothing's planned, so we'll just make it up as we go along.
Yeah, we'll probably go and gate crash somewhere and just sort of invite ourselves. We might come around your house, Graham, or something. Say, hey,
Right,
party!
Do that.
Well, yeah.
Do that if you want. Where are you all? How far apart are you? We'll start with you again, John. Where are you?
I'm in a town called Keynsham, which is just to the east of Bristol. So, but it's Bristol. really,
And
so
you have to spell that. You have to spell that when he says it. Oh,
Because of the Radio Luxembourg thing.
you've got to spell it. Horace- We can't
Horace
go off, you
Bachelor.
have to spell it.
yeah,
So where was
Keynsham.
Florida? Yes.
Keynsham.
Right. So for anyone who's not as old as you guys, this was, I don't remember it. I've only heard about it. Radio Luxembourg had an advertiser who promised to help you win the football pools. And
He used to predict
it-
what the football scores would be, so you could hopefully win the pools from it.
Right.
And the guy's
Wasn't it
name
called
was
the
Horace
infra?
Bachelor.
And wasn't it called the infra draw system?
That's exactly what it was called.
Yes,
the infra draw
yes.
system. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. And so he used to say that you had to write to him. It was basically at his house, wasn't it, to get the information?
It was, and he's got a blue plaque on his house. I can tell you.
Here's a funny
No.
thing about- Yeah. And another funny thing about his house, it's got a funny roof. This is true.
Yeah.
It's got a funny roof. And he wanted all the tiles painted on the roof. Okay, because he just wanted them painted. I think he wanted them painted blue or green. Because of the design of the house, the painter only did the ones that could be seen from the garden. And Horace didn't know this. So all the ones in this, it was a really, really strange looking house, or the roof was. And it was only painted around the outside, but he paid for all the tiles to be painted, but they never were.
Right.
So he wasn't as smart. He wasn't as smart as he thought he was, really, was he, Horace? From
No,
that
well,
point.
if he was that smart, did he ever win the pools?
Well, he had a big
That's
house.
true.
I can tell you that. He had a great big house, and the house is still there. So he
Well,
did. Now, whether he got it from winning the pools, but that
Or
was it.
from
That's-
people paying him to tell for him
Yes.
to tell them how to win the pools.
Yes.
That's how he made his money. But if he never actually, I mean, if I knew how to win a substantial prize in a big lottery or something, I wouldn't be telling people how to do it.
You
I'd
just
keep
do
it to
wouldn't
myself. I just do it. I wouldn't be paying Radio Luxembourg money to advertise the whole thing. I just do it.
Just keep all the money, get all the money coming in. You don't want to share it with anyone, do you? You want to take the top
Exactly.
prize every single week.
Yeah, because it was always based, the pools, like the lottery, on how many people won it that week and how many draws there were that week and everything. So the more people that know, the less you win. So he had to be, I mean, is he dead?
Yeah.
Oh, we can't. Great, we can't defame him. Oh, so he had to be a crook, didn't he? I mean, he had to be a crook.
Yes. The
Yes.
family rules don't rule here. I tell you, we can carry on and say what we flipping well like.
He died about 100 years ago, didn't he? I mean, he was ancient.
His daughter's a great listener of the Old Gits.
Is
Oh,
what?
there you go.
His daughter, she loves listening to the Old Gits.
Oh,
she
right.
does.
Well, there's one listener I've lost you then.
I'm joking. It's all right. I'm joking.
Just jumping in for those of some people may not even know what the pools are.
No,
let alone how
no.
imagine it. In which case, what it used to be a coupon you used to get every week from otherwise about 3 companies all told, and you had to pick out 10 football clubs that you thought were having score draws, and then from that you used to get, if you got 8 from 10. Then that was the winning jackpot, and you got yourself some money from it. But you had to submit it every single week, and sometimes you'd have a man come round, and he'd collect the pools coupon from you and take your money, and sometimes submit it to the pools company. But there were some people who didn't quite do that.
My mum and dad used to do the pools, and sometimes they'd let me put the crosses in. You did pick 8 out of 10 or something, wasn't it? And it was, I don't know, 20p at the time. But they also used to do a thing called spot the ball.
That's
So it
right.
was
They did that in the close season, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, spot the ball. And you put the little cross where you thought the ball was. And this fellow called Peter used to come around and collect the money and the pools coupon. And he came around our house for years and years and years. And I remember him going bald, a bit like me. He lost his hair over the years, but he still came around and collected the money. And then one day,
hold on. What's got the losing his hair got to do with coming around picking up the money for the pool?
I'm coming on.
Because he had to go round his house. Anyone going round his house would pull their flipping hair out anyway, wouldn't they?
Lose their hair. They would indeed.
Yeah, of course
One
they
day-
would. One day he
they
came
never find
round.
your house.
One day he came round and he had a full head of hair. He came up the garden and my mum said, "Look, Peter's got a wig on." And every other week after that, we used to go try and see the join. It was very funny.
So he didn't do it gradually. Like one week he'd come with a hat, next week there's a little bit going on. He just went full on in and thought no one would notice.
Yeah, but flash forward many years, and this was only a couple of years back. Chris, you came to see me in a show I was in at the Bristol Hippodrome, didn't you?
I did, yes.
This guy, Peter, was in that show, and I hadn't seen him for years and years and years after that. But I swear to this day, he had the same wig on because it was exactly the same as I remember it when I was a little boy. It's the same colour and everything.
Exactly the
We
same
used to have a bloke come, and I think it was a Thursday night. He would knock on the door, and we'd get all the pools coupon and everything, and he'd take it away, and then that was the end of it. And he stopped coming. And my mother was like, because it was always like, when we win the pools, and this bloke stopped coming. And my old man would go, well, we don't play the pools anymore. He doesn't come round. So then the old man said, do you know, and this is only like 2 weeks later, the old man said, there's a bloke comes in our pub apparently on a Thursday night, different bloke, and he takes the pools coupons in the pub. So like, every Thursday night, my old man had a free pass to go to the boozer all night because he was going to do his coupon. I'm sure that it was the same bloke, and my old man was buying him a drink not to knock on our door. I'm certain of it. Certain that's how that was going down. That was Littlewood.
What a great
Can you remember how much it was? Can you remember how much it was that you'd win the jackpot usually?
I think it was about $500,000, wasn't it? It wasn't. I don't think it was $1 million. 75,000.
£75,000 it was. And you think now it'd be good to have £75,000, but by the realms of what you have with the lottery and whatever, now 75 grand is just like small change, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. So that's Keynsham.
Keynsham.
Okay. Who
See,
wants
puts on a subject, we'll talk about it for ages.
who wants to go next and say where they are right now?
What, let Chris, because he'll take up an hour.
Okay.
No,
Chris,
I will only say that I'm in North Bristol,
Right.
which is I suppose people would know the area of Bradley Stoke, and
Sadly
reason it's exactly right, yeah, because it started and the town's about 27 years old now, and when it first was built, and they had nothing in place, and in fact, it was that time that those many years ago that when everyone bought their houses, they started going into what they call as negative equity. And
Yeah.
it was a huge, great story, and people were losing money on their houses. Their houses were worth less than the mortgages they'd taken out. And hence it got the name, instead of Bradley Stoke, it got the name of Sadly Broke.
right.
And
Okay.
and it got stuck for a very, very long time. It's now an affluent area and it's doing well. It's got all the infrastructure in, but at that time it had nothing whatsoever. There was no shops, no doctors, no schools, no nothing. People were just moving into the area and finding themselves not without anything to go to, and then suddenly their houses were worth less than they actually paid for them. So they all went into negative equity. This big story at the time, and as I say, it's only just now kind of losing that title because of where it is and how long it's been going, and all the infrastructure is in there. So, but still, it's still affectionately known to certain people as Sadly Broke.
Sadly Broke. Okay.
you
And
go.
what about you, David?
Well, we've got to clarify a couple of things with Chris, because he said it was now a very affluent area.
Yeah.
As opposed
Effluent,
to
I said. Effluent.
It's an affluent
Effluent.
area. Well, and
And
here's another
also,
thing, Graham.
we also
none
need to
of us
clarify
know-
something else. He doesn't live in Bradley Stoke.
But I'm
Sorry,
just saying that's the closest place that everyone's going to know, isn't it? Bradley Stoke. I mean, it's what 1 mile away from me, so that's it's closest.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you live in Patchway.
You live in Patchway. Come on, tell the truth.
Yeah.
You live in Patchway.
Well,
It's not
I
his
just-
fault
but-
it's Bradley Stoke. Come on.
And
you
no
gotta
one
tell the
knows.
truth.
There's a reason. There is a reason why Chris won't tell you exactly where he lives, because nobody knows where he lives. These guys have been to my house. I don't know how many times. We've been to David's house. Don't know how many times. David, when was the last time you went to Chris's house?
Never been. Never been. We don't even know where he lives.
I sent out the invitations. Did they not get through?
No.
Oh well, okay then. There you go.
Well,
So
I'm just
anyway,
quiet then because
what,
it's
what,
gobsmacked.
if you've been invited, you never responded, so you never get another invite.
Okay. So where are you, David? Are you Bristol as well?
No, I'm in Weston-super-Mare.
Okay. So not too
So-
far away.
No, it's not too far away.
Well, wasn't Weston-super-Mare known as? I worked in Birmingham for a while. I think it was known as Birmingham on Sea.
Well,
Is that still the case? Does you get Brummies go there for day trips?
No, there's two things wrong with that. One, you had the audacity to call it on the sea.
Okay.
And the other thing is, yes, Birmingham is. In fairness, we were out on the weekend just walking around the seafront, and the coaches from Birmingham were absolutely. It was a lovely weekend, and of course they must have gone. Well, let's get some coaches. We can get some coaches on to get to Western, and there must have been about 30 coaches from Birmingham here just last weekend. So
Right, so it still goes on.
It still goes on. Yeah, it still goes. And Western is still as tatty as it's always been. It hasn't. It's never changed. It was rubbish when I first moved here, and I have been unable to pull it up by its shoelaces, and it's still rubbish today. So there. So I love
Okay.
my town. I love my
Okay.
town. That's right.
Okay.
So
It
where are
sounds like
you?
it.
I'm in Hitchin in Hertfordshire, about
Oh.
40 miles north of central
Well, I'm
London.
in Hitchin this Saturday.
What are you doing?
I'm going to the. I've got to say this quiet because my wife doesn't know this, and she's in
Okay.
the next room. I'm going to the Factory Playhouse on Saturday
Okay, and what are you going there for?
to watch the show.
Oh, what's on?
Made in Dagenham.
Oh, they're doing a version of that. And do you say the Factory Playhouse? I don't know. There's a Queen Mother Theatre.
Oh, you see, I know more about your town than
You
you
do.
know about your town.
I only found out about a year ago that it's called the Queen Mother Theatre because the Queen Mother was born in Hitchin. And I didn't even know. And I've lived here for about 8 years now and didn't
Well, have a
know
look.
that's where she
The
was born.
Factory Playhouse is in Hitchin.
Okay, and they're doing a version of Made in Dagenham. Oh, well, that might be quite good. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
wondering
it's-
whether I should go to that now.
It's
Is
completely
your,
sold out.
is your son in it?
No, because he doesn't go to that one anymore. My son used to go to the drama school there, but he doesn't go there anymore. And
There's a drama school in Hitchin as well.
Yeah,
I should go out at one.
One of the top 10 in the country.
Really?
You want to say to your wife, right? I need to go and see this man because I need to do the pools.
And it's Cooper.
And then you can go out and get a pass out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so how did you three meet then?
Oh,
Hospital radio.
Hospital radio, yeah.
All those
Yeah, it
years
was,
ago.
Which hospital?
It's the Bristol Royal Infirmary, which is where it was based. But at the time, it used to broadcast to, I think, 23 hospitals.
23 hospitals, yeah.
You were networked.
Networked. It was networked on telephone.
Yes, we were. Yeah.
And that was, I started doing hospital radio in 1978, which is quite a long time ago. And then, Chris, you were involved. I think you'd already been involved, hadn't you? You were there when you were one of the guys.
I joined 1976.
Yeah, and David, you were there around about the same time, I guess.
I joined in 70 or 71, I think it was. I joined.
Oh, wow. Gee.
Yeah.
I never did hospital radio. What is the... I started in Australia, so I had a slightly different background. Don't even think they have hospital radio there. I started on community radio at a Sydney station called 2RRR, and it was the most amateurish radio station ever. You had to bring your own records. So you weren't just the presenter, you were also the programmer. Now, that sounds like it might make for a really interesting radio station. However, the only people that really had the time to commit to this community radio station, 2RRR, were either unemployed or retired. So the format ended up being heavy metal or jazz. That was it, depending on who was on the air at the time. And so how does hospital radio differ from, say, what we now know? Now we've got community radio here. How does it differ from that or commercial or BBC radio? What's the main difference then?
I suppose the audience aren't ill, are they? That's about the main difference. But
I see.
And
a lot of sick people used to listen to me on commercial radio. Don't get me wrong. The boss used to tell me that all the time. A lot of sick people listen to you. But anyway, what is the difference?
Well, they can't get away from us. It's simple. That's simple. You know, they are there, and if they want to listen to the radio, they're going to listen to us. Right. If you're in hospital radio, so that's a good thing.
Going back to those years, I mean, if you wanted to do the radio thing, which we all, we don't have to explain to each other why we wanted to do it. It's just in the blood, isn't it? So we all wanted to do it, and certainly in Bristol at the time, there was nothing apart from the local BBC radio station.
Yeah.
And that was
which
it.
would have been almost. Well, was there a commercial station back then? Was GWR on the air there?
No. Radio West, which became GWR, was the first commercial station, but that started in the mid 1980s. So
1982, wasn't it? 1982, Radio West started.
Something like that,
was it 1982, 83, something like that? Because that's when we joined, wasn't it? But as you say, there was no commercial radio station there, just the BBC, and that was it. Nothing else.
Wow. So hospital radio was the thing to do, and so off we all went and joined hospital radio. Had a great time, and the number of people involved in hospital radio, certainly in Bristol then, that went on to even work on national radio now.
Yeah.
There was a guy called Kevin Greening. You know his name?
He was Radio 1.
He was Radio 1, but he was with us at hospital radio in Bristol. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Loads of other people who went.
And
on.
did you all get on, or were you rivals?
No.
It wasn't.
There was a rule. There was a golden rule that hospital radio used to finish at 10 o'clock at night. And at 10 o'clock at night, you used to lock the place up and you used to run out through the courtyard past the mortuary, because the mortuary was just alongside where the radio station was. You had to run along by the mortuary, through the gates before they shut them, and then down the road to the pub. And then you used to get 2 pints in because
half an hour, because it was 10:30 was back then. Exactly. It was as late as you could drink.
Yeah, exactly right. There was nothing later than that. So you had to run down and get a couple of pints in before they closed the bars at 10:30. But everyone used to go down the pub after the show, lock the place up, down the pub, have a couple of pints and have a laugh, and then we used to make our way home from there. So that was the golden rule.
So another guy who was involved in hospital radio in Bristol, who we all knew, and you knew him, Graham, from your time at the BBC in Swindon, was Trevor Fry, who did the Late Show then.
Yeah.
So Trev was in hospital radio before he joined commercial radio, and we all were there together, and then BBC and what have you. One night after coming out of the pub, and this was at the time when you'd have 2 pints and go, it's okay to drive. So we go and have our 2 pints. And Trev, by trade, was a chef back in the day before he became a broadcaster. And we were talking about Kentucky Fried Chicken one night with Trev, and he was rubbishing it. No, you don't want to eat that. No, give you food poisoning. Horrible stuff. You should cook proper food. That was that. So off we go, and he had an old post office yellow van. Do you remember his van, Chris and David?
I do, yes, because he used to do mobile discos as well.
That's right. But all his
The
DJ
old Morris 1000 van.
That's right.
Was it
Yeah.
yellow?
Yeah,
That's
it
remember
was
that?
yellow, wasn't it? Yeah. And he rubbish KFC, so that was that. Well, on the way home, I thought, all this talk of KFC, I'm a bit peckish, so I'm going to stop on the way home and get a KFC. So I stopped in the KFC and I pulled into Little Lape, which was a bus stop outside of it, jumped out my car, and then I suddenly clocked this yellow van in front of me. I thought, hey, that's the same as Trev's van. Never thought anything of it. Went in the shop, and there was Trev, just ordered his chicken and chips, having rubbish KFC all night because he was a chef. And he looked at me and he said, we will never mention this, my boy.
So then
So I
you all kicked on from hospital radio. You all ended up with careers in radio then?
Yeah, part-time. I mean, speaking of myself, I had we all, I can say, had other careers as well. Because
Very wise in radio. Yeah.
Exactly. Contrary to popular belief, you don't earn a fortune. No, so I had a
Getting
career.
into radio for the money is like joining a monastery for the sex.
Yes, exactly
Well,
right. Yeah.
That depends, doesn't it?
I was going to
Well-
say, can you join the monastery for sex? Can you?
The Catholic
Just a load of-
Church has been scarred with certain things, so maybe you can now. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe that
yeah.
wasn't a wise thing to say. Yeah,
No,
Yeah,
maybe
exactly
not.
right.
No, but you're right.
You're,
We all had other careers, or I certainly did anyway. Always did radio as a hobby, but we're very blessed to be able to do it professionally as a hobby as well. Yeah, weekends, evenings, and stuff like that. Yeah.
right.
So certainly,
so,
certainly commercial radio days. Yeah.
so how did the idea then? So the three of you are over the years kept in touch, and then at some stage somebody said, "Why don't we do a show together?" Is that what happened? Because it was a radio show. So take us through the history of Old Gits and Hits.
Well, the Old
It
Gits
was-
Hits.
It was the manager of the station in Bristol, which put the idea out there. He put it to John, didn't he? And
He did. We were
yeah,
at
that's
the
right.
Bristol International Balloon Fiesta where I was working, and I was sat down having a chat with this fellow called Pat Hart, who now runs the BBC station in Birmingham, by the way, and is partly responsible for sending coachloads of people to David's Manor. But he and I were having a chat and having a bit of a whinge and a moan, talking about our kids and wives and what have you. And he said,
Wives? How many wives have you got?
4? How many have you got?
Oh no! Listen, I've got half of one. Well, I just take the pick. I say which part of it, which time of day.
Yeah, we were having a whinge over a bit, and he said we should turn this into a radio show. I said, that's a good idea. He said, do you know anyone who might fancy it? And I thought, yes, I know exactly the people that would go for that. So I made a few phone calls, and we got us together, and there were 5 of us originally, which was too many. But there were 5 of us, and we got together and started doing this show on a community station in Bristol called BCFM, which is quite a large station, broadcast to the whole city. And it just went on from there. And then other stations picked it up and wanted the program, and we sacked the other 2, or they decided to leave. They were a married couple. We had another guy called Chris and his wife Liz, who we'd all known from years before, and they just didn't quite get on.
No, just hold on. Now you've got to clarify the point. You're just trying to be too kind now, right? Wherever Chris went, not Chris with us now, but Chris who came along Wherever
Yeah.
Chris went, his wife went.
They
Yes,
were
so-
joined at the hip.
Chris
Yeah.
was invited, and
Yes.
he turned up. He turned up with his good lady, and
Yeah.
how we just
We
being
all looked at
gentle. We all thought, oh, what are we going to do now? And
So this is like Yoko Ono, is it? Really? The
Yes.
situation.
yeah, very similar to that, And as Chris said, they're joined at the hip, so they would laugh at each other's jokes, laugh at us, but they laugh at each other's jokes, and in the end, they found it too stressful working with us three, so they left.
Yeah, well, that makes sense because there's a great Seinfeld episode, and they talk about the concept of worlds collide. It's like you have different worlds. So you will have your world of radio, and you might have your world of your going to your pub. That's another world, and then there might be another world. You might be into sport or something else, whatever. You've got to keep the worlds apart because when they come together and worlds collide, and obviously there's the world of your marriage and your relationship, and then there's the world of the radio show, and it looks like that there was a bit of a war of the worlds there going on, wasn't there?
A little bit, yeah, that's right. And when you've got your other half with you, there's certain things that you feel you can't say to your mates.
Yes.
Even though it is on the radio, and it got a little bit like that. I'm being polite, as David said.
Yeah, well, no, I was in bands for a long time, and we had a golden rule, and this may sound sexist, but it was no girlfriends at band practice, and that was just it. You just couldn't bring a girl along to band practice.
What? Not even anybody else's girlfriend.
That never happened. No, but it was actually no girls at band practice. Yeah, so it was totally sexist.
Doesn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, look, we said at the time, the show is called Old Gits.
Yeah.
So this lady was called an old git.
Yes.
It just is, and that's he's a great friend of ours. He is a great friend of ours.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that, and so is Liz. But it didn't work because and that was as simple as that. So then someone else joined, and he couldn't cope with it either.
Right.
He couldn't cope with us three. It's strange
Right.
because we'd known him since year dot, but he just couldn't cope with us in a studio environment, could he? So he took a sabbatical, and that was like 3 years ago. He's never been back.
So this is a community radio station. So you've got this show up and running now. What, weekly?
Yeah. Yes.
Weekly,
Right.
yeah.
You got this weekly show up, and what happened then?
We carried on for 7 years.
7 years.
And you
Yeah,
were
we've been
just on the one station because you're on different stations now, aren't
We
you?
were on the one station for a year or so, and then another station in the north of Bristol, near where Chris lives, picked it up as well. Only because Chris was a director there, and he said, "Well, shove it on there, no problem."
Okay.
And then a few
You should have
other
left that bit out because that sounded quite impressive that another station picked it up. It's syndication. You
Well, we
should have
can
left
do
that bit
it,
out.
because throughout the years, there are other stations have contacted us.
They
And that
have
was how it
contacted
started. They have
They said,
contacted us. and said
can
that
we
they-
have your show? So we let them have it, and
Yeah.
we had a few other contacts, and just mentioned it, and a lady called Shirley Ludford, who you might know from the Swindon
Oh yeah,
area.
she was on the she ran the community station in Swindon.
And she still does, and she
Previous
still loves our
BBC
show.
Wiltshire too, yeah.
Correct, yeah. So Shirley takes it for her station as well, and there's a number of others around. There's a few online ones who wanted it. So, and
It's
and we-
international as well, isn't it?
We've got one
International.
station in just west of Benidorm that takes
Good
it.
enough. That's international. Another country.
And
Yeah.
he contacted us, and in fairness, we seem to travel quite well as a program. The Old
Right.
Gits, so that's there every week as well.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So then that's going well. And then is it when podcasting comes along, you think we want a piece of this action as well?
Well,
Yeah.
we're always late to the party because we're old gits. So when podcasting had started sort of to take off a little bit, we thought, well, why not? Well, let's do a podcast version of our show and put it out there and just see what happens. And
Well, it
To
was
our
my son, my youngest son, who said, "You need to put this on. You need to do a podcast because more people are listening to podcasts than they are to the radio." And I said to the guys, "Well, look with this podcasting." And then we get to where John says, and we decided, well, we could do this. We could do this as a podcast.
Right. So
So
you
that's what-
basically
that's what-
edited down the weekly show into a monthly show for the podcast. Have I got that right so far?
We take every we take the best of the month, worst of the month maybe, and we make a sort of 40-odd minute podcast out of the whole month show. So the
So
very
every
worst,
show is a month in the making.
absolutely, yeah. It's the only reason we do it now is for the podcast, of course.
Okay. So on podcast radio, though, that's weekly. You're on the weekends.
weekly,
So
yeah, it's our
so
weekly
now
show.
now
It's a
so
weekly-
that you have to take the monthly one and then cut it down again, or
No, not at all. We take the weekly show, and that the weekly show that we do for all the community stations, that is the show minus
Oh,
the
I see.
music
Okay,
and a few,
right.
few little edits. So every week it's a fresh show, and it's recorded that week. Goes out on
I
podcast
see.
radio.
Right.
Yeah, Saturday
Okay,
mornings at 11 o'clock.
There you go. Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock on podcast radio. Now, the podcast version, different. Now, I haven't heard the radio version. I've only heard the podcast version, which I know is slack of me, but that's what you're dealing with here. The radio version would have the music in it, wouldn't it? So for the
Yes.
podcast version, you have to take the music out because of various licensing
Yeah,
rules and
yeah.
regulations. So the thing that confuses me is the show is still called Old Gits and Hits, but
It
there's
is.
no hits.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. So
That's very, very astute of you, that is very astute.
You've seen the flaw, you see, in the
See,
way we've
Graham-
kind of
Graham-
presented it
Graham
to
has-
podcast radio.
You can tell he's won Sony Awards in the past, can't you? With comments like that. That is just so on the ball.
right. Well, do you gloss over that, or do you use that as a feature that
Well,
it's,
no,
it's
we
Old
could-
Gits with no hits?
We could.
Yes.
We could change the name of the show, couldn't we? We could call it Old Gits and I don't know, any word rhyming with hits or
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. The old Gits and
yes,
yes, exactly
Yeah,
right.
That's hits. Yeah.
We also
Yes, yes.
we did it Christmas, didn't we? We did the ogres. So we did say the program could be called the ogres. So we had an awards ceremony that we did at Christmas, which we recorded at the Royal Albert Hall. They let us in there to record it.
Wow. In front of
Yeah.
an audience?
yeah.
Oh yes.
Well,
absolutely.
but the cleaner was there anyway.
Okay. No, seriously, it was the Royal Albert Hall.
No, of course not. It was made up. and pretended.
No, we said it was
No,
the Royal
it was-
Albert Hall. Look, Graham, this is radio, you see, so you can create whatever
Yeah.
you like. When you get a job in radio, you'll understand that you can.
Okay. Well, hopefully that
As
hopefully
some-
that'll
someone
happen
once
one
said-
day. Yeah.
Someone once said, "Radio is the theatre of the mind." And,
Yes.
Right.
and what we did take photographs, you see, but we used a facade that we found. It looked a bit like the Albert Hall, so we even took a video of it to kind of promote the show at the time, and
Yes.
and everyone was just drawn in.
We got to
Right.
get this in. Now. Check out our social media, which is on Twitter, Old Gits and Hits, or at Old Gits and Hits, Instagram at Real Old Gits and Hits, and we've got the Facebook page as well. Plus, we've got the website, which we call Old Git World, because once
Yeah.
you go into Old Git World, you can't come out. It's just a meandering load of corridors and it's a maze of curiosity. So Old Git World, which is oldgitsandhits.co.uk. The video and so on that we did for the Christmas show, where we presented the ogres, which is a bit like the Oscars, which is
Yeah.
Old Gits and Hits Awards,
Yes.
and that it was Jerry at Podcast Radio that came up with that name. Actually, the ogres. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
didn't know
You've
he
got to
came
be
up-
got to be careful when you fake stuff like that, because I can remember one April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day used to be a great day to be on commercial radio. It's not anymore, but it used to be, because they're either lame. We took we grabbed a load of different recordings of live artists, and we had everybody from the Rolling Stones to Led Zeppelin. We had people who were dead. And we said we were doing a concert from Bournemouth's ground. We called it. We didn't call it. Did we call it Party on the Pitch or something like that? There was a concert called Party on the Pitch. I think ours was like. We had a similar name to that anyway. And so we put echo on the mics and we introduced people on stage. We said, "Ladies and gentlemen, David Bowie," or whoever it was. And when we fade the crowd up, and we did the whole thing. We did the whole show that way. And just in case anybody was fooled, we had a Black Thunder promotional vehicle down at Dean Court at Bournemouth's ground. And anyone that did show up, we gave them, some movie tickets or something to say, no, look, it's April Fool. That's all it was. And the only people that complained were the police, who complained that they weren't notified of this ahead of time. It was a breakfast show. Like, we had the Rolling Stones. I mean, it was so over the top, and we had the Queen arrived, and so you have to be very careful. You can get into trouble with the police, who aren't as bright as the rest of the population, as it turns out, because not that many people did get fooled. They all realised it was just for fun. Yeah,
we've all done the April Fool's gags on the radio, though, haven't we? On commercial radio.
Oh yeah.
What have you done? What have you done?
Well, I did one where this was on Easter Bank Holiday Monday, which happened to be the weekend that the clocks had gone forward. And on the Bank Holiday Monday, I said we just had a letter from the Home Office saying that there was a mistake in that the clocks had gone forward the wrong weekend. They should have gone forward next weekend, not the weekend just gone. So in order to correct the adjustment of the time, because had the clocks allowed to have, at the time we were on, there would be a knock-on effect over the week of a 1 second build-up every day, which is nonsense if you think about it.
Yeah.
And therefore we'd be out of kilter with the rest of the world. So we're going to put the clocks back again at 8 a.m. this morning, and then forward again next weekend on the Saturday night, Sunday morning, as usual. So I briefed the newsreader person and so on. So at 8 o'clock, the newsreader bloke said, it's 7 o'clock, here's the news. And then all the time checks I gave, and I repeated this message. Very simple thing. And we had phone calls and complaints and so on. And I had to knock it on the head, because this was classic gold radio, and we were kind of networked at the time from Bristol, so it was going out in Reading and Bournemouth and.
But why did you have to knock it on the head? It's April Fool's Day, for goodness' sake.
Because the bus driver in Bath had thought, he'd had the radio on. He thought, an extra hour in bed.
Well, he's not the programme director.
He was late for his shift and almost got sacked. And a care home in Bracknell, they sent all their old ladies back to bed, didn't give them breakfast in time. And the man somewhere else sent his paper boys back home again because he didn't want to deliver the
papers. But that's the point of it, is so that idiots get caught out. And for some reason, radio, someone went and sucked all the fun out of radio and decided, no, we are now going to cater for idiots. And radio has changed, It's
you know why it is, Graham, don't you? Because you say they're catering for idiots, because it's now run by idiots.
Especially if you're trying to do something funny on the air. Because Adam Carolla made this point on his podcast. I listened to it today. It must be from earlier this week. Earlier this week? Here we are. We're on Monday. I know. Well, anyway, it's the latest Adam Carolla podcast anyway. And he said, he was talking about comedy, but he's like, the people who seem to be in charge are the unfunniest people you've ever met. And that seemed to happen with radio stations. And you'd be going in there trying to justify and tell them why it was funny, whatever it was that you'd done or were planning. And it's just a shame, isn't it?
None of the bosses these days in radio have got senses of humor. That's the thing. They're just totally worried about the PC, the Won't Brigade, whatever. Okay. Yeah. And they're just totally worried about that. And they're just worried about their figures. And they won't entertain going off that sort of tangent, will they, anymore? People have got talent, or have got that creative juices like people used to years and years ago. That's just been quelled now. People can't do that anymore. They have to stick there, and they got to do their crunch and rolls and their 5 in a rows. And then we come back again and pretend we're local.
But they're all about 18, aren't they? Who look about 12 anyway, all the bosses these days. I mean, I was working on commercial radio once. I've told the guys this. And this was, what was it? Star Radio, which we've all been on, which used to be the Eagle, and it then became the Breeze and what have you, and Greatest Hits. And I was doing a program. I did. It was quite well. And I went home again. And then the boss phoned me up. This was the program controller. He was about 12. And he went, John, got a problem. I said, what's the matter? I thought I'd left my wallet there or something, He said, got a problem with the music. What? He said, you switched 2 songs around. I said, what do you mean? He said, in the hour after 10 o'clock or whatever time it was, he said, you switched to, I said, oh yeah, of course. I said, because, the song that started the hour was so dull, I couldn't start with that. I had to switch it round to the next one, which was, And I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston. I thought, that's a dull song to start an hour with. No, it's like you start a funeral with that, not a song on a radio show. So I switched it with Mr. Blue Sky, ELO, right. Which was, it's not like I even changed the song. I just switched the order of it. He said, you can't do that. It's highly researched, and our audience expect to hear the songs in that order. I thought,
Yeah, no, they don't.
can I complain? No, of course not. Don't be so stupid. I think that was my last show on that station.
Yeah, it's an industry that is meticulous about the unimportant, and I think some of the people they can measure that. They can go, that was not that song that was on the list in that order. They can measure that, but they can't measure the impact that you have on somebody's life when you make them feel a little less lonely, or they can't measure that. So that's they only want to control what they measure. And I always think that the funniest thing is that, nowadays, a lot of program controllers, what used to be called program directors in Australia anyway, now call themselves content directors.
Oh, yeah.
But they since when you think about working with one of these people, since when have they ever contributed to the content? They've told you what not to do, but they'll have this bloody format clock, and that doesn't help content in any way. That helps distribution of the music and the distribution of the commercials and the news and whatever. A format clock only helps with distribution. They should just call themselves distribution directors, because that's all they are. They've got all these rules, and they just sit there like a policeman making sure that you follow these rules. And a lot of people don't even know why the rules are there. I can remember when I started in Australia, it was like a hanging offence if you played two female artists back to back. It was like, I don't even, and then that rule disappeared. And then
that's your dream, David, isn't it?
What, two?
It is really.
Yeah.
As many as I can get in a room, please.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think
not
it's
necessarily back to back either. But...
I think it's left it wide open for podcasting, because podcasting wouldn't be popular if radio was any good. There'd be no need for it.
Here's the thing that we all worked on a station, and they changed the format. Okay. So, and they're nodding because they know what I'm going to say.
You know exactly what you're coming to. Yeah.
They said, you'll find in the studio now, you'll find a book. It's a loose leaf folder. When you're playing the news, you turn the first page over, and it tells you exactly what you can do for the first song out of the hour. And it was all playlisted. And then you turn the second, when that song's playing, you turn the next page over, and it tells you what if you can talk, and it gives you 3 options of the things you can say. And that was it. You could not say anything else other than what was written in that book.
But do they ever give you a reason why that is so important?
Yes. And the reason...
Yes, they did. Go on, Chris, carry on.
Well, the reason they said that was because they pulled this research company from Australia. And they grabbed these Australian company, came over, and they said, this is what we've done in Australia. This is what works in Australia. So it will work for you because you've got such a dense market. So we're going to make you do this. And as David said, we play a song at the news. And not only this, all right, now before you do that, okay, you have to calculate how many songs you're going to be playing in that hour. And then when you worked it out, whether it could be 14, 15, 16 or 17, 18 songs maybe in the hour, okay, you have to select your little jingle. And it says your name, the station name, playing 16 songs this hour, okay? Now, that's the first thing, all right? Now you've already declared now you're playing 16 songs in this hour, okay? And then you play the first song, you turn the page, it says, play this little jingle here and play the next song. Then you turn the page, it says, play this jingle here, play the next song. Play this jingle here, play the next song. So 5 songs in a row out of the news. Then you've got to back announce the last 5 songs you played. And then you've got to forward announce the next 3 songs you're going to be playing. And in the 20 seconds you've got, then put your personality into things and then go into the ad break. And this goes all the way through. And if you've selected that you're going to play 16 songs in an hour and you don't play 16 songs in an hour, then the boss calls you in and says, why did you say you're going to play 16 when you only played 15? Now this is what we're bloody up against. This is ridiculous. But that's what was happening, and it was all due to a company that came in from Australia. They paid for them to come in. They researched all the songs, and they said, "This is what works in Australia. This is going to work for you across all your network stations." So
it's great. This is great because you went to Australia.
Yes, the meeting they presented.
I started on the radio in Australia, and I don't know why rules that supposedly worked in Australia would translate to Britain, because when I was in Sydney, there were only 2 FM stations, Today FM and Triple M. And this was 1990 I first went there. There were only 2 FM stations. The rest was on AM. So for them to say that and ABC Radio, which also ran Triple J, which was the equivalent of Radio 1 down there, ABC Radio didn't have anywhere near the market share the BBC always had a market share here of around 50%, maybe more. ABC never got anywhere near those numbers, so it was a totally different environment. So why they thought it was a one-size-fits-all, I don't know. I'm not saying it didn't work in Australia.
One of the reasons was because one of the program directors of the group was a TV chef. So that shows you what was his name? He's no longer
Michael
with us.
Bucked. Michael Bucked.
Well, what was he as a chef? You remember?
I can't remember it. Michael Barry.
Michael Barry, the chef. You must know the name Michael Barry, the chef. No, well, he was a TV chef, and he was
in Britain or Australia?
In Britain.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was one of the main directors of the group. And at the meeting, they presented us with all this. One of the presenters said, "But what about the presenter personality? When we're presenting the program," and they said the station has the personality, not the presenters. And he was sacked the following week.
They sacked him.
They sacked him the following week for asking that question. So it's been nonsense. We've lived through the nonsense, and we're still surviving, all 4 of us.
So how good does it feel?
As well, just before we go on to that, with this particular presenter, okay, got right hacked off about this format. Okay, so what he do? He was then pushed back to the evening show. So he was doing 6 till 10 in the evenings, and so what he do is right hacked off with not being able to do anything at all. So he used to watch the likes of Emmerdale. Okay, then Coronation Street, and then EastEnders on the telly that was in the radio studio. Okay, now then, the songs were playing. He turned down the songs that were playing very, very quietly, and he turned the telly up so he could watch the soaps on the telly. And then suddenly he'd have to speak. But did he turn the telly down? No, he couldn't be asked to do it. So what he did then, he just carried on, did his link. So in the background, you heard Coronation Street going out, or you heard EastEnders going out, and he couldn't give 2 monkeys about what was happening. He just do it, and what the heck, just carried on doing it until they sacked him. Yes.
Was this the bloke from Scotland by any chance?
It was. Yes.
Well,
yes.
Did you hear the story about? I won't say his name, but the bloke from Scotland. He used to be partial when he did a lunchtime show. Just before going up the road and having a few pints and coming back and doing his show. And the program boss man called Mike called him into his office one day and said, a bit of a problem. How can I put it? But at lunchtime, a little bit too much pop, meaning the drink. And this guy said, "Oh, okay, I'll play some more rock then." Walked out. It's a true story, apparently.
Brilliant. So how good does it feel then now to not have those rules and to be able to just say what you want and talk about what you want in the podcast?
Well, funny enough, we did our program today, and we said exactly that. Today, we were talking about that when we were recording this week's program. We said that it's great. It's liberating, really, to be able to do it, provided, and some people say that, you've got the line that you have to go up to before you cross that line, which is not broadcastable. Well, some of the stations say that we always skirt that line. But it's nice,
we straddle it. We straddle it.
We straddle the line.
We know where the line is. We don't cross it, but we do straddle it.
Yeah.
But we do say we're old gits, and our eyesight's going a little bit, so we can't see the line, and it's a bit fuzzy. So
it's a fuzzy line. Yeah. So how has the podcast then evolved since you've been doing it? Because that's a long time to be doing anything together with the same 3 people. So how has it evolved along the way?
It's probably got worse, hasn't it? No, it's it's not really evolved. We've just been doing the same old thing. No, we've been doing.
We started crap, okay, and we've maintained that level. Okay, we haven't got any better, but thankfully we don't think we've got that much worse. We may have got worse, I don't know, but we haven't got any better at all.
See, here's the thing, you're saying that as though the program is planned. We don't plan it, so in which case it's as fresh to us every week as it is to the listener. So there's no planning in the program whatsoever. The only
So
time
you just all connect up at the same time in a way. And are you in the same room these days, or are you like this since COVID?
We started in the same room. We always did it in the same room, into a radio station studio. So it was done in quality and so on. And then the pandemic hit, and like a lot of people, we all started setting up at home. So we've got our own microphones, as you can see now, and little mixers and computers and what have you. And we did the show from home over something called Clean Feed, and then we started using Zoom so that we could see each other. And because you know, if you can see each other, you bounce off each other a little bit more. And that's still how we do it. Every now and again, last week, for example, I went, and Chris and I, because David was away, we were in the same room. It's much easier if we're in the same room, and we've more energy as well. And we stand up in the room. We don't sit down and do the show. We tend to at home, but we stand up, do the show, and our mantra is, remember, we've talked about commercial radio a lot. There was a strap line on one big commercial radio group: more music, less chat.
Yes.
Well, our strap line is more chat, less music. And sometimes we'll do a link, as we call it, between songs, and it can last 30, 40 minutes. We just ramble on. There's no rules or anything. And do we prepare, was the question. No, we don't prepare as such. We all come up with things that we want to talk about, but we don't tell each other what we're going to talk about.
So you get the genuine reaction.
Yeah, exactly. And then we all chip in. And there's no
because of that.
There's no lead presenter. There's no nothing. We all just literally take it in turns to lead. We even take it in turns to choose the music every week, just to mix it up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
On the radio bit.
Does the podcast make money?
I think we made about 4 million quid last year, didn't we?
And then the Royal Albert Hall, just from the Royal Albert Hall royalties alone.
Yeah, that cost us 5 million.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't make any money. We looked at getting a sponsor, didn't we, a while ago? In fact, we looked at lots of different sponsors. We've taken the show to different places. We've done what you would call an outside broadcast. Or we recorded the podcast, the show, a cider factory, Thatcher's, and a pie factory, Pie Minister, and a few other places. Prison. We went to a prison.
Did go to a prison. Yes, we did.
We done a prison. Yeah.
So that was a real Johnny Cash kind of inspired thing, was it? Like a San Quentin kind of thing?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So, how did you find that? Which prison was that?
Shepton Mallet. It was closed.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't. I only say that because I used to work in I used to spend 3 days every month in a prison, not for any reason like that, by the way. In Australia, before I was in radio, I was an air conditioning engineer, and the contractor I worked for, we had the maintenance contract for Parklea Jail out in Western Sydney near Blacktown, and it was terrifying because that was a proper high security prison with towers, with guys with rifles. And we had to do the air conditioning in the towers. Funnily enough, in those towers, there's a toilet, but they sit on the toilet with the rifle looking at the crims, which always made me laugh. And you take a young apprentice with you, and if they fancy him, it's a little bit, you're walking past cells and you can hear them, "Oh, I want to get at you," and it was just horrible. And it was 3 days every month I hated. And I was just wondering whether the experience was like that, but the prison was closed. Okay,
it was closed.
Well, it was open. It was open for tours, so you could go around and see the cells and what have you. And it was a prison where the Craze had stayed. I mean, you know more about it, David, than the rest of us.
I was a guide at this prison.
You were a guide, right?
A tour
guide. Not a scout. Not a scout. He was a guide.
No, a guide with the dress. Had the dress as well, and. So we did a tour guide, and I took these guys around the prison. And so it was when it closed, it was the oldest working prison in the UK, and it's still there as a tourist guide, tourist what do you call it? Tourist attraction.
Attraction, yeah. David, can you just explain one thing? Because you took us into all the areas, David, didn't you? And you walked through all the areas with us as we walked through, didn't you?
Yes. No.
Yeah.
No, not
No,
all the
you
areas.
didn't.
No, not all the
No,
areas.
no.
Definitely
There
not.
was one area that David said was haunted, and for no love, no money would drag him through that area. He said, if you want to go through it,
None
you
of
go
hope.
through on your Todd mates. He said, I ain't going through because I'm scared witless to going through this bit. So he pushed us through this area. So John and myself, we walked through and we were okay. We didn't get touched anywhere. Don't think so. Well, I didn't anyway. Unfortunately, I went back again to see if it would happen, but didn't happen either second time. But anyway, but young David was there was an area there where he even in his tour guide position would not take visitors through. Would you, David?
Not at all.
And that was because you were scared of ghosts.
Well, I went in there the first time. It is supposedly this particular part of the prison. Yeah, is I've got a terrible feel of the ghoulies. I don't, the ghosts I'm all right. It's just the ghoulies.
You just don't like the willies put up, do you?
I do. I quite enjoy that, but that's another story. This particular part of the prison it is reputed to be haunted. Now, I won't tell you the reasons why and whatever as well. But the first time I went in there, I did experience it, and I thought I am never going back in there again. And I went in there once, and I wouldn't go back in there. There were other parts of the prison that other people wouldn't go into, but I had no problem with that. But this one place, I just wouldn't go in there.
And the prison itself housed the Krays for a while, didn't it?
It did, yeah. The Krays, yeah. When they were naughty boys, it housed them. It's an interesting place. They've still got the cell, the hanging cell, the hanging tower where they used to hang people.
Oh, the gallows were there, weren't they?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
It was an interesting program. Interesting.
I bet it was.
There is a podcast version of it as well, but it wasn't quite as interesting as the Cider Factory.
Oh no!
Why was that interesting? Were you boozing while you were broadcasting?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Is there any other way to do it?
You don't
Well,
go to a cider.
no. I mean, the reason I don't drink anymore is because 97, 98, my first UK radio station, 2CR, I mean, we got really out of control. We had a bar in the studio. So, yeah. And I don't drink anymore since then. Since 98.
There was another radio. That's another radio station I used to work at in Golden Square in the old days, and they had dump fridges, and in those dump fridges it was just full of beer, and you could just go and help yourself to whatever you wanted to, and very often breakfast jocks there will be absolutely as a newt by 8:30 in the morning. But just saying that the cider place we did go to, they do every now and again send us some little free samples every now and again, and we
got a stash.
Well, like, you know me, I don't drink. This is the thing. So I keep this for guests because it just saves me going out and buying anything because I'm
don't ever have any guests.
Give it to us. We would have drank that.
You see, only special guests get to know the address.
He keeps it for guests. He never has any guests on the
We established that at the very beginning, didn't we? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, as you can tell, I don't get many guests because I've still got these left over.
All right, we're getting close to the end now. I've got to ask you, podcasts you listen to that inspire you?
I quite like a bit of Louis Theroux.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
So long-form interviews. Yeah.
The long-form interviews, it's just absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and I love his persona. I love the way he questions and finds things out by just asking what seems to be quite a simple question, but he's able to tease all that information out of people, which perhaps, you wouldn't even bring yourself to speak with in most cases. But yeah, no, I enjoy Louis Theroux as a podcast. David, what's yours?
Well, for me, you see, I listen. We said about this earlier today. I like to listen to the old gits because
you can't pick your own.
No, just a second. I've got to tell you why. I've got to give you the reasoning why. The reason why is because I never know what we get up to when we're in the studio recording it. So when I listen back to it, I go, "Did we actually say that? Did we do that?" So it's educational because you have to remember we are genuine old gits. Right, and the memory goes, doesn't it? And so, from that point of view, to be honest, I will always listen to what is a recommended podcast. So when you pop up and look to see what you're going to play, when it comes up as this week's star podcast, I'll listen to that. So I listen to anything at all.
Chris,
I'll tell you what I listen to. It's whatever it might be from whoever's done it. But I quite like historical ones. Especially in my home city, because when I went to school as a young kid, 6, 7, 8 years of age, my headmaster in my school then was an expert on Old Bristol, and at least once a week we go catch the bus as a class. We catch a bus and we go into Bristol city centre, and he'd give us a tour around certain places. And of course, I was so young then; it didn't actually stick in with me. And there's so much history, not only in our own city, but in other cities as well. So it's not specific podcasts from specific people, but it's on a subject. And I like the historical one when people tell you about the buildings in certain cities, especially in Bristol thing. I love Old Bristol because it's such a seafaring place, and I know it's got a bad history, and I know where it's come from. We've all gone through the Edward Colston thing. I walked past over the weekend. I was walking along the city docks and walked past the spot where the statue of Edward Colston was thrown into the docks itself. It's now in a museum just on the side of the docks now, but there's other places, that you got the Landogger Trout pub where the likes of Long John Silver, that Treasure Island was actually devised over a pint 500 years ago. It's that sort of stuff, and it's very historical, and I like that sort of thing. I like to find out stuff that I should have listened to when I was very young, about 40 or 50 years ago, but I'm just reliving my childhood, I think, on those.
Okay, finally, from each of you, or if one of you wants to be a spokesman, I don't care. What is next for Old Gits and Hits?
A podcast that earns us money.
All right, well, think about the Patreon. I know a lot of people who are making money from podcasts through Patreon. There's Theroux was her name. I forget the name of the podcast. And she lives not far from me. She lives at Letchworth. And she packed in her job because her and her friend do a true crime podcast. And then, of course, there's Bean, who you may have heard on podcast radio. Bean was one half of Kevin and Bean, the breakfast show in Los Angeles for over 20 years on the world-famous K-Rock. And he now does a podcast with Ali, who used to be on the show. She's in Los Angeles. He's in London. And they do really well out of Patreon. So Patreon might be something worth having a look at. I don't know.
Yeah. The other thing we talked about on the show this week as well is TikTok, and we were talking about a 17-year-old who's now got themselves a penthouse apartment in London. So we need to expand maybe onto TikTok and do something or other, because we all fancy penthouse suites now in London.
we did elaborate on that and said, as Old Gits, we probably end up with a caravan.
Well, okay. Well, you've got to start somewhere, or end somewhere.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, guys, it's been fabulous talking to you, and thanks for letting me just a little bit into your world. You're going to be my special guests, not the Friday after that, whatever date that is. I think, John, you worked it out, didn't you?
April 1st,
Not this Friday, but Friday after that is the 1st of April.
I think it might be the one after that. I don't know.
8th of April.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out. Anyway, it's coming up, and you'll be my special guests on Podcast Radio, which goes out, the Pod 20 goes out Fridays, 5 p.m. and across the weekend on Podcast Radio. Guys, thank you very much. It's been fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Been
you.
fun here as well.